Staying calm during difficult and trying times isn't easy. Joining us now is clinical psychologist and the author of Find Your Calm, Dr. Jaime Zuckerman, with 5 simple, actionable tips to manage anxiety during turbulent times like we're going through right now. Welcome to Bloom.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So I think what's so refreshing is that you kind of reassure us that a lot of times that these thoughts and feelings that so many of us are experiencing are actually normal, even though it might not feel that way if you're going through it.
Sure, it's very normal. We are all experiencing a collective trauma of sorts. There is not one of us that has not been impacted by the pandemic, by lockdowns, by losing jobs, school's not in. So it's very normal and actually healthy to feel anxious. It's an appropriate emotion for what's going on.
So that's good to know. So the first step is to definitely keep in mind that the thoughts that you are having are normal. And I know the second one is something that I have to do regularly. And I came from a heavy news background, and that is to limit what I'm hearing, because the more this information comes into my head, the harder it is for me to stay calm. And these are things that are completely out of my control.
So one of the things, and again, it's very difficult to do, especially in your field, is to monitor your news intake. And what I tell people is to pick a local station, a national news station, and check in once in the morning, once in the evening around dinner time, never before bed. And what this does is 2 to 3 minutes in the morning, 2 to 3 minutes in the evening, and it really kind of streamlines and limits your intake so that you don't feel overwhelmed and that your brain's able to process it and understand rather than kind of get bombarded, which is typically what happens if we don't limit it.
And what are your thoughts on social media? Because I know that's another of your 5 steps.
So we are so intertwined with social media these days. It's how most of us get our news and know what's going on with people around us. And so again, the same rule applies, is that check your social media once in the morning, once in the afternoon. Be very mindful of that just kind of mindless scrolling that we tend to do. We don't even realize that we're doing it while we're sitting on our couch, and really kind of have an intent and a plan and a focus when you go onto social media. If there's accounts that are bothering you, that are causing you anxiety, you don't have to block them, but you may want to restrict them so that they don't keep popping up in your newsfeed.
All right, that's another good one. What about, I know that number 4 is telling people how you feel. What exactly do you mean by that?
So we forget sometimes to just let people know that whatever they're talking about is making us anxious, or we don't want to go out to dinner that night just because we're not up to it. And I think we forget that we can tell other people, and chances are with what's going on right now in the world, most people feel the same way that we do. Maybe they're just not talking about it, and people can be very understanding. If a conversation is making you anxious, simply excuse yourself. Say you have to take a phone call, go to the bathroom, or just decline an invitation. Typically, people will be understanding. I think we just forget to talk about it.
Also, a lot of what we hear these days are to be mindful, but you say come up with mindful strategies. What's that?
Yeah, so I talk a lot about this in my book. There's certain strategies that we can use to not just be present, but strategies to learn to sit with the very normal discomfort that's coming up for us. Because the more we push it away, the larger it gets, the bigger it gets, the more we convince ourselves that we can't handle it. So a lot of mindfulness strategies involve sitting with that icky feeling that you may have, sitting with the negative thoughts, and realizing that you can still do the things that you enjoy and at the same time feel uncomfortable, and that eventually those uncomfortable feelings will start to dissipate and pass.
So if we take these actionable steps, should we start seeing results pretty immediately?
So I think what happens is, as long as you are not avoiding your discomfort, as long as you are engaging with things that you enjoy, you will start to see a pretty quick and immediate result. Keeping in mind that what we're going through is anxiety provoking. The goal is never to not feel anxious in an anxious situation. The goal is to be able to manage it and sit with it and still do the things that are in line with your values and your goals. But yes, you should see a pretty quick change.
Yeah, I think to your point, it'll just help us kind of manage our anxiety, because a lot of us, it's easy to jump into that fight or flight of anxiety feeling all the time, and you just don't want that as a constant. Doctor, it's been
That's
so
right.
great catching up with you. Thank you so much for joining us on Bloom.
Thank you for having me.
And to find out ways to manage anxiety and to learn more about Dr. Zuckerman, head to WFLA.com/Bloom. I've put a link there for you. And we'll be back with more Bloom right after this. Don't go away.